Marriage as a path to awakening, breaking the karmic cycle through love and forgiveness. Part 3. Attachment versus awakening in relationships, the true path of love in karmic connections. In today's world, we often view love as the ultimate goal of our relationships, something to cherish, seek, and hold onto. However, the teachings of Buddhism invite us to reconsider what true love really means, especially in the context of karmic relationships. Love, in its truest form, is not about comfort, pleasure, or security. It is not about clinging to another person to fill a void within ourselves. True love, especially in karmic relationships, is about awakening and growth. It challenges us, forces us to confront our deepest fears, and ultimately, leads us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the nature of love itself. Attachment, on the other hand, is often mistaken for love. Attachment is an emotional bond that is driven by desire, fear, and the need to hold onto something that brings us comfort or satisfaction. It is not rooted in spiritual growth or wisdom but in the ego's desire to control and possess. When we attach ourselves to someone or something, we often lose sight of the bigger picture. We become so focused on the person or object of attachment that we fail to recognize the true purpose of the connection, awakening. The difference between attachment and love. In Buddhism, attachment is considered one of the primary causes of suffering. The Buddha taught that desire and attachment bind us to the cycle of samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, keeping us trapped in a never-ending loop of craving and dissatisfaction. When we attach ourselves to someone, we begin to expect them to fulfill all of our emotional needs. This creates an imbalance in the relationship, as we begin to rely on the other person to provide us with security, comfort, and happiness. True love, however, is not based on attachment. It is rooted in understanding, compassion, and the recognition of the impermanence of all things. Love in its purest form does not seek to possess or control, it seeks to support, uplift, and awaken. True love allows both individuals to grow and evolve without the fear of losing each other. It is unconditional and unselfish, free from the ego's need to grasp. While attachment often disguises itself as love, the deeper truth is that attachment stems from fear of loss, fear of being alone, and fear of not being enough. It is a subtle form of control, a way to hold on to something or someone that makes us feel safe. But in doing so, we lose sight of the true purpose of love, to awaken, to learn, and to evolve. The role of karmic relationships. Karmic relationships, as described in Buddhist philosophy, are relationships that are influenced by past actions, whether in this lifetime or in previous lives. These relationships are not random, they are formed based on unresolved issues, past debts, and the lessons that need to be learned. When we meet someone with whom we have a karmic connection, it is often not out of simple attraction or coincidence. It is a relationship that exists to help us confront our past actions, heal old wounds, and grow spiritually. In karmic relationships, attachment can be particularly strong. The emotional bond that forms between partners can feel intense, almost like a magnetic pull. But this attachment is often a reflection of the unresolved karma from past lives or unhealed emotional wounds that need to be addressed. It is not love in its truest form but a manifestation of desire and the need to possess. For example, consider a woman named Sarah, who has always had a deep fear of abandonment. She has been in several relationships where she felt emotionally neglected, and this fear only grew stronger with each failed connection. One day, Sarah met a man, Mark, who seemed to be everything she had ever wanted in a partner. He was attentive, kind, and supportive, and for the first time, Sarah felt truly loved. However, as their relationship progressed, Sarah found herself becoming increasingly dependent on Mark for emotional fulfillment. Her need for reassurance and constant attention grew, and she began to feel anxious whenever Mark was unavailable or distant. At first, Sarah thought this was just normal love, the deep connection that comes from finding someone who understands you. But as time went on, she realized that her attachment to Mark was not based on genuine love. It was rooted in her fear of abandonment and her need to possess him in order to feel secure. She was not allowing the relationship to grow naturally. Instead, she was clinging to it, trying to control it, and in doing so, she was causing herself emotional pain. Sarah's story is a perfect example of how attachment can disguise itself as love. Her deep fear of abandonment led her to attach herself to Mark, and instead of experiencing love in its truest form, one that fosters growth and mutual support, she became entangled in her own fears and insecurities. The deeper lesson that Sarah needed to learn was not about holding on to Mark but about confronting her fear of abandonment and healing her emotional wounds. Only then could she experience true love and awakening in her relationship. The awakening through karmic lessons. When we are in a karmic relationship, the challenges we face are not meant to punish us but to help us awaken. Every relationship, especially those with karmic connections, has the potential to teach us something valuable about ourselves and the nature of love. Karmic relationships push us to confront our attachments, fears, and unresolved issues, and in doing so, they help us grow spiritually. The awakening process in a karmic relationship involves recognizing the difference between attachment and true love. It requires us to let go of the need to control, to possess, and to hold on to another person out of fear. It is about learning to love unconditionally, without attachment, and without the desire to control the other person. True love in a karmic relationship is not about finding someone to fill the void within us but about sharing our lives with someone who supports our spiritual growth and evolution. A good example of this awakening can be found in the story of James and Lily. James had always been a restless soul, constantly searching for happiness outside of himself. He had been in several relationships, but none seemed to bring him lasting peace. When he met Lily, it was as if everything clicked. She was kind, beautiful, and loving, and he felt an instant connection with her. For a time, he believed he had finally found the love he had been searching for. However, as their relationship deepened, James began to notice that his attachment to Lily was becoming more and more intense. He began to rely on her for emotional support, for validation, and for happiness. He could not imagine life without her, and the thought of losing her filled him with anxiety. Lily, on the other hand, was spiritually grounded and recognized the importance of personal growth and self-awareness. She loved James, but she did not want to become the source of his emotional security. She wanted him to find peace within himself. One day, Lily shared her concerns with James, explaining that true love was not about clinging to each other but about supporting each other's growth. She encouraged him to explore his own path, to find happiness within himself, and to not rely on her or anyone else for his sense of fulfillment. This conversation was a wake-up call for James. He realized that his attachment to Lily had been based on his own insecurities, and he had been using their relationship as a way to avoid confronting his own fears and emotional wounds. James took Lily's advice to heart and began a journey of self-discovery. He worked on letting go of his attachment to her and started to explore his own spirituality. Over time, their relationship became more balanced, and they were able to support each other in their individual growth. James learned that true love is not about dependency or attachment but about mutual support, understanding, and awakening together. The final lesson: awakening beyond attachment. The core lesson in karmic relationships is the difference between attachment and true love. Attachment binds us to our desires, fears, and insecurities, leading to suffering until we learn to let go. True love, on the other hand, is rooted in awakening. It is about growth, mutual support, and the recognition that both individuals are on their own spiritual journeys. The true purpose of a karmic relationship is not to hold on to each other but to help each other evolve, learn, and awaken. When we are able to release attachment and embrace unconditional love, we begin to experience a deeper connection with ourselves and with others. Conclusion: true love is not about possession or control. It is about growth, awakening, and mutual support. Karmic relationships challenge us to confront our attachments and fears, and in doing so, they lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the nature of love. When we let go of attachment and embrace awakening, we experience love in its truest form. The purpose of separation: a path to freedom, not failure. When we enter relationships, we often do so with the hope that they will last forever. We dream of shared futures, growing old together, and living a life filled with love and companionship. However, in the teachings of Buddhism, we are reminded of the impermanence of all things, including relationships. The idea that relationships can end is not something to fear or avoid. Rather, it is an inherent part of life's natural cycle. Sometimes, relationships end not because they have failed, but because their purpose has been fulfilled. In these instances, letting go is not a sign of failure, but an act of freedom both for ourselves and for our partner. In the Buddhist perspective, attachment is one of the root causes of suffering. When we cling to the idea that a relationship must last forever or that we must stay in a relationship at all costs, we create unnecessary suffering for ourselves. The teachings of impermanence, anicca, remind us that everything in life is constantly changing, and that includes our relationships. Just as we grow and evolve individually, our relationships also grow, change, and sometimes reach their natural conclusion. Recognizing this is essential for understanding the deeper purpose of separation. Understanding the impermanence of relationships. The Buddhist teachings emphasize the impermanent nature of all things. In life, nothing stays the same forever, and relationships are no exception. They evolve, they change, and sometimes they reach a point where their purpose is fulfilled. It's easy to think that the end of a relationship signifies a failure, but in reality, it is simply part of the process of growth and change. When we hold on to the idea that a relationship must last forever, we may begin to force things to continue even when they no longer serve us. This is where attachment creeps in, leading us to hold on to what is no longer helpful. But in Buddhist thought, attachment only leads to suffering. The key is to understand that relationships, like everything else in life, have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They are not meant to be permanent fixtures but are tools for growth, learning, and awakening. It's important to recognize that relationships often come into our lives to teach us something. They bring with them lessons that help us grow emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically. When the purpose of a relationship has been fulfilled, it may be time to let go. This does not mean that the relationship was a failure, but that it has served its purpose in our life and now it is time for both partners to move forward on their individual journeys. The wisdom of letting go. Buddhism teaches that attachment to anything, whether it's a person, an object, or an idea, can cause suffering. When we hold on to something too tightly, we create an illusion of permanence, which only sets us up for disappointment when change inevitably occurs. In relationships, this attachment can manifest in the fear of separation, the belief that we cannot live without the other person, or the desire to keep things the way they are, even when growth and change are calling. Letting go of a relationship can be one of the most difficult things to do, especially if we have invested deeply in it. However, Buddhist teachings suggest that it is precisely in letting go that we find freedom. Freedom from the illusion of control, freedom from the fear of loss, and freedom from the attachments that bind us. The Buddha spoke of the importance of non-attachment, not to reject love or connections but to approach them with the understanding that everything is temporary and change is inevitable. When we learn to let go of a relationship with grace and compassion, we free ourselves from the suffering that comes with clinging. This process can be painful, but it is also liberating. In fact, true freedom comes when we release the need to control the outcome of a relationship and trust that what is meant to be will unfold naturally. A story of letting go, Emma and Daniel. Let's consider the story of Emma and Daniel, a couple who had been together for 5 years. They met in their early 20s and quickly became inseparable. At first, their relationship was filled with excitement, adventure, and passion. They supported each other through challenges, celebrated each other's successes, and built a life together that seemed perfect. However, as the years went by, Emma and Daniel began to change. Emma found herself pursuing a new career path that required more time and energy, while Daniel became more focused on his personal growth and spiritual journey. They still loved each other, but they found themselves growing in different directions. Their once harmonious relationship began to feel strained, and the connection that had once felt so natural now seemed forced. One day, Emma sat down with Daniel and shared her feelings. She explained that, while she still loved him deeply, she felt that they had reached a point where their paths were no longer aligned. She suggested that they part ways so that they could each continue to grow individually. Daniel was initially resistant to the idea, not wanting to let go of what they had shared. He feared that the end of their relationship would mean failure, that he would lose the connection he had worked so hard to build. But after some reflection, Daniel realized that Emma's suggestion came from a place of love and wisdom. He understood that their relationship had served its purpose in both of their lives. It had helped them learn, grow, and discover more about who they were as individuals. It had provided them with the foundation they needed to embark on their separate journeys. In that moment, Daniel understood that letting go did not mean failure, it meant freedom. They both parted ways with love and mutual respect, knowing that they had given each other something valuable and that their paths, while now separate, had been intertwined for a reason. They had fulfilled their purpose together, and now it was time to move forward. The liberation of letting go. Emma and Daniel's story is a powerful reminder of the importance of letting go when the time comes. Their love for each other was real, but the relationship had reached its natural conclusion. Instead of clinging to the past or trying to force something that was no longer serving them, they embraced the wisdom of impermanence and allowed themselves to move on. This story also illustrates a key aspect of Buddhist philosophy, that true freedom comes from releasing attachments. By letting go of a relationship that no longer served their growth, Emma and Daniel were able to free themselves from the suffering that comes with clinging to what is no longer meant to be. In doing so, they allowed themselves to evolve and continue their journeys of self-discovery and spiritual growth. In relationships, we may sometimes hold on for fear of being alone or because we have invested so much in the connection. But Buddhism teaches that it is in the release of these attachments that we find peace and freedom. Letting go is not an act of failure, it is an act of trust in the natural flow of life and an acknowledgement that everything is subject to change. The true purpose of separation. The true purpose of separation, as understood through Buddhist teachings, is not about failure or loss. It is about recognizing that relationships come into our lives to teach us valuable lessons and help us grow. When those lessons have been learned, it is time to move on, knowing that the relationship has served its purpose. Letting go of a relationship can be a profound act of freedom. It allows us to release our attachments and trust in the flow of life. It opens up space for new opportunities, growth, and healing. Rather than seeing separation as an end, we can view it as a new beginning, a chance for both partners to continue their individual journeys and to embrace the next chapter of their lives. In the end, the Buddhist teachings remind us that attachment leads to suffering, but freedom comes from letting go. By embracing the impermanence of life and relationships, we can learn to navigate the inevitable changes with grace and wisdom. Separation, when approached with awareness, is not a failure but a gateway to greater freedom and spiritual growth. Conclusion: letting go is not a failure but a step toward spiritual freedom. When a relationship has fulfilled its purpose, releasing it can lead to personal growth, healing, and the next phase of our journey. Recognizing the impermanence of all things allows us to approach life with greater peace, understanding, and trust in the natural flow of existence.